Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Suzanne Taylor King, and we are here for the Productive and Prosperous Entrepreneur Coffee Chat. And I am swooning this morning because my guest, Pablo Gonzalez of Be the Stage, is here as my guest, and we're going to talk all things content, community, podcasting, all the juicy goodness. And I want to just say two things about you, Pablo, that I found you on LinkedIn. I followed your content. I came to your live podcast recording numerous times, and I still attend when that works in my schedule. It's amazing. And I saw something incredible with you. And it took a little while, but I eventually worked up the nerve to reach out to you and talk surfing. And I've been learning from you ever since. And I am honored that you are an honorary member of the Idea Lab community, of the value that you drop every week, and that two of the Idea Lab experts actually have been students of yours. So honored for you to be here today. And oh my gosh, we have Melissa Henry here saying hi. Hello, Pablo. Hey, Suzanne.
Hey, Melissa.
Darlene saying hello. Daniel Andrews, that's somebody I want you to meet, Pablo.
Right.
He's saying good morning. Denise, my business besties here. Tom Van Dyke, my rock star story brand guide. And wow, we have amazing people here listening today. So
No surprise, Suzanne. I have the feeling every time I'm around you, I'm like, man, people that hang around Suzanne, like you have proven to me that you are a bat signal for high quality people.
nice.
And everybody that I send your way is always like, anytime your name comes up, it's always like, yeah, man, she's doing stuff at another level and it's really cool. And I completely agree. And I'm super pumped to be here. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing and what you represent and how you show up. And quite frankly, how smart you are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you.
Sure.
So let's get into it. Let's get into, you're an entrepreneur first, right? And how do you function at the level you do with the content, the creation, the connections? How do you do all that? What makes you feel productive on those days?
Oh, man, I think way before being an entrepreneur, I'm an extreme extrovert, and I get
Mm,
a lot of energy from this, right? Like when I'm in connection mode with someone, when you
yeah.
and me are in this like deep conversation, this is where I draw the majority of my, I guess it sounds cheesy to say power, right? But like it's where I draw energy from. It's where I draw knowledge from. It's where I draw happiness from, inspiration from it. And
Mm,
when I was, thinking about starting a business early 2019, I heard something at one of these conferences that I went to that was, if you're going to start a business and you're doing anything other than building a business where the thing that is your superpower is the thing that you do within the business and it's the thing that drives the business. If you're going to do anything different than that, go get a job because it's too hard. And
mm,
as somebody who like deep down inside is driven by this, I just really took that very, very seriously and followed that North Star to figuring out a business model and a flywheel of how do you prosper from an ability to
mm.
connect with people, a superpower of being able to fall in love with everybody that I meet, and the ability to communicate that well and kind of be a hype man of sorts. So
Yeah.
the short answer is I get power from this right here, these conversations, meeting great people. It's where I get my ideas from. I think that there's enormous value in the cross contextualization of what you have learned in your journey and what somebody else is trying to figure out. And as I've done that repeatedly, compoundingly over the years, it's turned into a big advantage for me.
Well, I love that so much. And yet another thing we have in common. I get so much energy from people. I love lifting people up. I love sharing knowledge. I love getting messages from people like, oh my God, what you suggested totally worked. I love that. And here's my question though. When you love that, when you've discovered that you're good at that and you lean into it, how do you prevent yourself from getting drained or doing it too much and then your personal life suffers? I mean, personally for me, I put exercise aside for a long time because my business was growing. I, didn't see friends because my business was growing. How do you deal with that? I know you do something special in the morning for yourself.
Suzanne, I don't feel equipped to answer that in a expert question, right? I think I struggle with it just like you. I go through times where I would say all last year, I'm like, I couldn't take a lunch meeting with people and it just really pissed me off. Right.
Mhm.
Like I was doing so many things and trying to keep up with so many activities and trying to grow the business. And I realized the answer is kindness, right? Like
Mm,
whether it's kindness to others or kindness to yourself, there is moments where you're going to have to say no, either to other people or say no to
yeah,
yourself.
yeah,
And you got to be kind about it. And like I generally find that it's way easier to be kind to other people and not as kind to myself. And I got to treat myself like that person that I expect other people to be treated by. And do and keep iterating, I guess.
yeah.
Like I don't really have the answer to that, to be like as an expert.
Well, I mean, I think it's real. I think it's, when you are um, putting out content,
Yeah.
you're engaging with people, you have a podcast, you have a team that
Yeah.
helps you do all that.
Hmm.
You have a community. Well, that's a lot.
So
That's a lot of energy expelled.
yeah.
And I just noticed, when you got on this morning before we hit live, you said you surfed this morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just excites me. I wish I lived close enough to the beach to do that in the morning. But that fuels you. So you are
Oh,
still doing things that fuel you as a person, not Pablo the public figure, you know?
yeah. 100%. I mean, definitely surfing is a big part of it. I
Mm,
think anytime I get to watch the sunrise over the ocean has all these like ancillary benefits, right? My
mhm.
circadian rhythm gets set the right way.
Yeah,
I do a little bit of exercise. I'm out there in nature. I feel a sense of presence while surfing. So that thing, um, it's really a big reason I moved to Jacksonville, because I know that I get all these benefits from this one activity, and there's only certain places in the world that you can count on doing it more than 100 days a year, and
mhm,
so I've made that a big part of what I do. But even in this entrepreneurial game, right? Like I'll go months without it, right? Like if I'm going, surfing is finicky, this, right? So
mhm.
sometimes there's waves, sometimes there isn't, and for whatever reason, sometimes there's like a big month of travel where it's the exact days that I'm gone where the waves are there, and when I'm here they're not, and you
Yeah,
just gotta find ways to do it. But I think it's a game of stick to itiveness and consistency, right? Like you only lose if you
yeah,
quit, and you only quit if you're having a terrible time. And if you can be kind to yourself and others while you are fumbling around in the things that don't, that you're not being successful in, and you can keep a positive mindset and focus on the moment,
mhm,
I think is the other side of it, right? Like while they're even to my highest level relationships, sometimes I don't answer every message because I'm all over the place. Sometimes it happens with us. But when I show up, I make sure that I show up,
yeah,
right? Like as somebody that speaks about networking and stuff like that, I get a lot of questions about how do you follow up and how do you do this and that and systems to stay in touch. And I'm like, man, I'm not perfect at that, but I know that if every time that you and I are face to face, that I
mhm,
bring my all and I make you feel like you're the most important person in front, like in my life in this moment, which you are, because I'm not thinking about anything else.
yeah,
That goes a really, really long way. So being kind and forgiving yourself about all the ancillary stuff that happens in between, and bringing as much as you can to the person in front of you while you're there, I think it goes a long way. And that's what's worked for me.
Oh my God, 100%. I mean, if that's not the definition of prosperity, which is one of my favorite words, and that's why it's in the title of the show, it's because it's really about moving forward with a tremendous amount of hope, which means you can't have resentment or regret or be beating yourself up too much. And that's kind of the stoic definition of that word.
Yeah.
Modern day people think that word means more about money, and it's not. And what I love about your definition is I don't really keep track of anybody in an official system, but when I'm with someone, and Daniel Andrews, who's joining us live, he teaches networking, amazing course. I've audited it and been a member of his community. And he said something to me that was so amazing, that when he's with me, he feels like the most special, exclusive person in my life, in my network. And I was like, yes, I don't know how I do that, but I love that. And you do exactly the same thing. Every time we engage, it's powerful, it's meaningful, you're present with me. So if anyone's listening to this, take that away. You don't have to be perfect with your follow up. You don't have to be perfect with your engagement routine on LinkedIn. It's important, but look, the most important thing is how you are being with people in the moment. And I love
Amen.
that.
Amen.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about content, community. What's happening for you right now with your community and your content?
Oh, it's an interesting period for me right now in this world, because I think the term community has tipped.
Mm.
And I'm the type of person that I went to college in the late 90s, and everybody was into Dave Matthews Band. And because everybody was into Dave Matthews Band, I just wasn't having it.
Mm.
Right. So it's funny for me to, when things that when things that I've like been really into for a while start tipping and going mainstream, there's a part in my brain that starts being like, well, that's not really that cool anymore. So I'm kind of struggling with that right now, to be perfectly
Oh my
honest.
God, I love,
But
yeah,
there's nothing more. I know why, right? Like
yeah.
it this community thing. I really believe that as things get more and more complex, right? As the world, when things get hard, we go
Mhm.
back to basics.
Yeah.
And I think that's what COVID taught us. That's why community blipped so hard during COVID, because stuff got hard and we went back to basics. The world right now is in a really weird spot, right? Like I think the economy and the monetary system and the run
Mm.
on banks, and people are getting laid off, and all this stuff is happening. So we're going back into this going back to basics thing. But I was just talking to Mike Greenberg on LinkedIn and saying that, and he's like, yeah, you know what? When things get tough, people go back to basics. And when
Mhm.
things get easy, those who stick to basics do well, period. Right.
Yep.
So this idea that forever we have been the human being is the quintessential social animal, right? Like we didn't get to the top of the food chain because we are the biggest, strongest, fastest, have the sharpest teeth, have like skin that can't be cut, or whatever other X-Men
Yeah.
power you want to put out there. We got to the top of the food chain because we know how to work well with others, right? Because we six cavemen decided that they could work together and pull down a woolly mammoth, extrapolate that all the way to 100 engineers could put two dudes on the moon, right? Like
Right.
so. We are right now going through that, right? Like we've been through this industrialization of communication era, and all these different things, right? Like um we went from being able to only speak one to one to speak to one to few, to social media hits and all. And now you've got a megaphone to the world. And then all these different like channels and apps and technologies have allowed you to take that megaphone and
Mm,
put it in front of absolutely everybody all the time. And the more that we start to feel that piece, the more that we want to go back to this like real, genuine connection. And to me, it's the ultimate moat, right? Like
yeah.
as the digitalization and AI and all this stuff starts to really hit, I think we're going into this world where there's going to be the digital giant in your vertical, like the Zillow, and then there's going to be the realtor who everybody in town knows. So if you want unique expertise and the person that knows somebody that can connect you to whomever you need, you go to that person, right? So that's it, right? Like community is the one thing that if you are not trying to build the next Facebook or Amazon or Zillow or Uber or whatever you're doing, your best bet is to make sure that there is 8 to 80 to 800 people that know you really, really well and that you know well enough to put them in front of the person that's looking for them. And that's never going to go out of style. So I think
Yeah.
that's what's happening in the world.
Yeah, I feel something, shifting as far as people looking and people needing that connection.
Yeah.
And for someone like me, for someone like you, we have our connections, and then we have our fans, and then we have our followers. And
Yeah.
then, it's like that concentric circle of people.
Yeah.
I have my business bestie. We talk almost every day.
Yeah.
We learn from each other. We share with each other. She's listening right now, and she totally thinks that she's my favorite. So don't tell anybody. She's
Okay.
totally my favorite friend, and we have business in common.
Mhm.
And then there's that inner circle of between 25 and 50 people who I literally love on every week. They get the best of Suzanne. And then there's the next level of people who are in my community. They come to my events, they love my emails. And then there's the followers who haven't come in yet. And I think all of those circles are craving just to be seen, just to be heard, just to feel like they're connected to something bigger than just their own lonely world, solopreneur style, working at home, typing on the keyboard. There's been a disconnection with this digital age.
Yeah.
And
I love how you compare it. I love how you talk about the consensus. Continue. I just that image
yeah,
of like the bullseye and how you come in to me is very, very real.
yeah, yeah. And
Um,
go ahead.
yeah, you know what I compare it to, Suzanne? I think about food,
Mm,
and how it's, we are what we eat, right? Like, and we
mhm.
are who we are around, and all that stuff's comparable.
Yeah,
And forever, we were so connected to the food we ate, right? Like we
mhm.
either grew it ourselves or it was grown by our neighbor.
Yeah,
And then industrialization hit and we went into this like mode of like production. And it became about how much we can create and how convenient it can be to prepare and all these different things. And at some point we realized that that was killing us. And it started with a ground roots movement of like seeking organic food and looking at all these different things. And eventually Whole Foods came out and eventually Walmart sells organic.
yeah,
And now, now it's easy to get that stuff everywhere. I think it's the same thing with human connection and communications, right? Like we've industrialized communications and
mm,
outreach and all this stuff. And as it got super exaggerated, we realized it's killing us. And people were seeking to be seen and seeking to be acknowledged and seeking to be valued more than anything, right? Like the human being is happiest when they're in service.
yeah,
So if you can understand the value that they can bring to others and enlist that into the benefit of someone else, you are making people happy and you are allowing them to be their highest form. So it really becomes this on the macro, it becomes how do we become the how do we put it into Walmart, right? Like, how do
Mhm.
we do this? Like, how do we make genuine connections, something that's like easily accessible? And then the micro, it becomes everything that you're talking about. How do we create like a frictionless path to go from the outer concentric circles, and slowly be able to get to the middle of that universe at the rate that you want, right? Like, not
Right.
everybody wants to be my best friend or your best friend, but maybe they want to be able to like count on you or me for something, or something like that. Or maybe they want to be inside that text chain with your business bestie all day long.
Mhm.
And providing that path in the easiest way possible for them and you is the game, right? Like, that's
Yeah.
that's the game of how you build a network these days. It's the game of how you create a community around you. It's the game of how you create that moat, so that at any moment, whatever happens around you, you are fully diversified in your influence and in your reach and in the things that you have available to you.
Yeah.
Whether or not your boss fires you or your wife leaves you, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, and I think you brought up an interesting point there, which totally stood out to me, accessibility. And I know there's tons of gurus and influencers out there who have, millions of followers. They get tons of engagement on their content, but they're not actually the ones engaging with the content. They're not reading your messages. They're not reading your comments. They're not really engaged with their community.
Mhm.
And I think for me, I've tried that route of, trying to engage with someone who was not accessible for whatever reason. And I think the mainstream entrepreneur is now wise to that. I think, I realized it 5, 6 years ago. Well, like, hey, I'm messaging this person and, I have a client to refer. I forget who it was, but I had this client to refer to this major, major player. But I had a question and there was they didn't care. They didn't care that I was reaching out to refer someone to them. And it made a light bulb go off about accessibility, about, being able to move from that outer circle into the inner circle and receive value or give value. And I think it's really apparent nowadays the difference between the two, between being an accessible influencer or thought leader. And if you call yourself that, you're probably not. So I feel like the movement between the circles, right? To be able to go from follower to community member to inner circle connection to business bestie. Don't worry, Denise, nobody's taking your place. But to be able to move between it was something I learned from positive psychology about being okay with relationships changing,
Mhm.
that sometimes you have a circle of best friends and sometimes you have to move away from certain people or they move away from you, and it doesn't have to mean anything bad, if somebody moves between the levels of connectivity. Um, and I just love the fact that you're accessible. I was afraid to reach out to you in the beginning. I
That's
was.
funny.
I was like, "Who is this guy? I love his content. I'm learning from him." And I don't even remember what I said, but the fact that you were accessible and that I was able to move from fan to follower to community member to actually having a conversation with you, if that's not an awesome content flywheel, I don't know what is.
Thanks. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that. I,
You're
I want to
welcome.
break down a couple of things that you just kind of highlighted there. Number one, I'm going to go in reverse order.
Okay.
Number one, the idea that you would think that I am inaccessible because I'm some kind of special thing is insane to me, right? But it is deliberate, right?
Yeah.
If the
Yeah.
brain justifies what it sees, right? So if the brain sees somebody on a stage and you are in the audience, the
Mhm.
brain tells you that person is special. You know, like they're in some kind of level that I strive to be at because I'm here and they're there.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a real power in understanding that, and understanding that nowadays, you know, back then somebody had to invite you on a stage and give you a mic. Today, this thing is a stage that you can leverage all day long, right? Like what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So I think that that's really, really powerful. Two, I had a similar aha moment as you when it comes to, well, the other very basic concept that I want to highlight there is that it is so much more powerful for somebody else to tell you how great I am than for me to tell you how great I am. Right?
Yes.
Like this,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
like this book behind me, Super Consumers,
Mhm.
it's all about that. It's all about this idea of, you know, enabling your super consumers to get together, because there is no more powerful way to acquire a client than a prospect overhearing a conversation between two of your super consumers. Period.
Period.
Right? So
Yeah.
how do we systematize that stuff, right? Like, and then the third is what you said, like you need that happening, and you need people to have access to you. My first two clients, when I set off in 2019 to prove that community creation is the future of business development, one was a best-selling author, world-renowned content strategist that had worked with A-list of the A-list celebrities. And we had a million plus person audience, launched a
Mhm.
community, bunch of opt-ins because of the reach. And very quickly that community was crickets. It became very heavy for that person to be, you know, like they had to be Superman inside the community, and that just doesn't work. Right.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
whereas my second client was an artist. She had a gallery in Philadelphia, and she had helped all these artists locally in Philadelphia, much smaller audience. When she opened up the community, similar amount of people opted in, and a huge percentage was fixed and in and like vocal. And she immediately had the Avengers, so she didn't have to be Superman. And it really, really hit me that if you were going to do this, right, like the amount of people that you have one-to-one helped and one-to-one have experience for you directly correlates to how this thing scales. Like somebody has to be within 1 degree of separation to you for the person that whom you are trying to help to believe that you are the person that can help them, or else the story becomes too distant, right? Like
Yeah.
it's really difficult for me to relate to Elon Musk, but it's not very difficult for me to relate to Greg Cohen, the guy that hosts the
Mhm.
Not Your Average Investor show, who has a 100-person company and $150 million revenue, and been on the front page of the Wall Street Journal twice. But he hosts a open Zoom call where you can show up and ask him questions and interact with him immediately. And in that open Zoom call, there is, 40, 50 people that have all benefited directly from something he's done for them. And it makes the brain way easier to accept that person on the stage is somebody that I can become if there is somebody
Yeah.
handing you the microphone that just took it from them, that has been helped by them directly, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I just ranted there for a while, but those are the three
No,
things
that's
that stood out
amazing
in that story.
because it's a combination of two different things that I've observed over the last year. So, that advocate status, or there was some other word I heard mentioned by Category Pirates about, having these people within your community or within your coaching or within your business who
Mhm.
always talk about you in rooms that you're not in.
Yeah.
And that's probably the single best thing that ever happened in my business. And it happened because I profoundly serve people without expecting
Yeah.
the return on investment. It's just that go-giver mindset.
Yeah.
And those people talk about me in rooms that I'm not in. So that's
I've
elevates
been in
it.
those rooms of people talking well about you. I
Yeah,
completely
well,
agree.
and I've been in the rooms where I'm talking about you or other people are talking about
Yeah.
you, right? Melissa talks about you all the time. And so when that happens, it not only elevates what I'm doing, what you're doing, but it also gives people a increased level of trust quicker,
Yep.
because I think Daniel Andrews calls it trust by something. And if he's still listening, tell me what it is in the comments, because it's like trust is transferable. He's said numerous times to me. So if he trusts me, somebody he introduced me to is going to trust me faster
Totally.
and deeper than, the normal 8-20 touches, whatever it normally takes for somebody to have trust. And the second thing that struck me was just this ability to have an advocate or have somebody speaking well about you, leading to referrals, leading to meeting their people.
Yep.
That's what you're trying to do with your content flywheel. That's what I'm trying to do with this show. And I think if more people grasp that this interview style,
Yep.
right? I'm talking to you, you're getting exposed to my people, I'm getting exposed to your people, and it's automatically a authority builder for me, and it's an authority builder for you with my people who don't know who you are.
Yep.
Which, that's a currency that you can't buy. You cannot go out there and buy that. Well, I guess you could go out and buy a place on a podcast.
Most people don't have the budget to buy that
Yeah.
authority.
Yeah. And so this organic reach of what you're talking about
Yep.
is phenomenal. Like, I'm excited for, just the opportunity to be able to bring people to other people.
Mhm.
And if you go in with that mindset, it's going to increase your business 100%. So tell me what you've noticed since you've been doing your style that you teach in your program. So
Mhm.
you have a content flywheel, you teach that within your program. Tell me what's changed for you in business since you've been following that method. I know it's changed for a couple of your students that I know really well, but I want to hear it from the source.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
The aha moment for me was when I was kind of like stalled out in my career in Miami in like 2012, 2013, something like that. And my CEO at the time, I was the director of sustainability for this like hospital company, hospital builder. And my CEO at the time got invited to speak on this like panel about smart cities. He decided not to go. They sent me in instead. And I show up and I share the stage with like it, and it's at the Economic Development Agency of Miami, maybe about like 50, 60 people in the room. And there is the head of Latin America for Cisco Systems and the head of like the Smart Cities Initiative of the World Bank and me on this stage.
Amazing.
Yeah, whatever. I didn't even know what I was getting into, right? Like, get up there, I do my thing. I've been on stages before because I've been very involved in nonprofits, so I'd speak a lot about that stuff. But when I got off that stage, it was a line of 6 people deep waiting to talk to me. And as I like cycled through the different people, what really hit me was these people I think I'm more important than I am. Like, because I'm like over here thinking I'm going to get laid off, and they're asking me about like, purchasing decisions or getting a job with me or hiring me or whatever. And the reason why, it was a combination of 2 things. One, that thing we just talked about, the brain on the stage, right? And 2, what Daniel talks about, right? Like this, like transitive property of authority. I call it being guilty by association, right? Like I was on a stage, guilty by association with these types of people. So people's brain said, Pablo must be at that level.
Yeah.
Immediately, right? And then and I got fascinated with that forever, and I followed those like kind of like breadcrumbs to build this system that I call the relationship flywheel. And it's all based on what we're doing right now, an internet talk show, right? If you're going live and you are hosting and you have the ability to share the stage with people that you want to be guilty by association with, and you do it over and over in front of other people, you start, transferring some of that credibility to yourself.
Yeah.
Multiply that by the idea that on social media, when we are collaborating on something and you're tagging me on something, part of my audience sees what you're doing. Ergo, part of my audience goes, oh, my buddy's on TV. And who's that interesting person next to them?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like a free distribution channel of kind of like organic reach as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also multiply that by the idea that while we're here, while we are doing this, you and I are nurturing our relationship. It could also be it could also be like the second time we ever meet, which it's not, right? But like you're either building a new relationship or nurturing a relationship that you think is key to you. You clearly have multiple people that are showing up, like Melissa and Dan and your business bestie and all these people whom you are also nurturing the relationship because they're now part of this conversation. You're doing a great job of keeping them as a part of it. And then after this, so that, we have this one-to-one thing going, we have this one-to-few thing going where we're sharing the stage with them as well. And then after this thing, you have the ability to then take this long form live, put it on YouTube, take the audio, put it on podcast, take the different, 3 or 4 things that you thought that I said that was smart and like the 20 things that you said are smart and make them into like small videos or different things and put them on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever you're doing. And now all these like nuggets are out there building those like parasocial relationships one to many where your face is in front of them and people are building that affinity. And when they see you, they might say, this is interesting. But because you also have the live show version of it, then they don't have to have this like large friction point of saying, wow, Suzanne just said something really smart. I wish I could talk to her. Can I get on her calendar or do I need to shoot her a DM and like show up? I can be like, well, I can just show up to the next live show and get a little bit closer to Suzanne. And maybe I get asked a question in there and she starts to see my name. So you are creating those breadcrumbs as you are doing it, right? Like that is the overall methodology. It's just like understanding what's valuable to people, sharing a stage with what's valuable, a person and the subject that they want to hear about, building the relationships one to few as people engage, and then repurposing that stuff to build the relationships one to many through content. What has changed in my business since I started doing it? Everything, right? Like, I've met my heroes, right? Like when you have a stage, we're just talking about category pirates. I've met all of the category pirates who are the people whose brain I most study. They've all been on my show because when you have a stage to offer someone, it's not like, can I get 15 minutes of coffee? It's like, hey man, I want to put you on a stage. And most people say yes, right? So yeah, you have the ability to punch way above your weight class in a conversation and then go be guilty by association with. You have this like frictionless nurture technique of everybody in my network, right? Like I'm not out there giving out business cards or getting business cards because I'm not Mr. Systematic CRM person, but I'm out there connecting with everybody that I meet on social media. And because I do this live show on a weekly fashion and I'm repurposing everything a week and putting it out there, I stay in front of the people that find me interesting with nuggets of value all the time. And what it leads to is frictionless referrals and credibility and getting invited to speak at conferences about the stuff that I do or getting an intro to XYZ, just like that, just like the person that you get intro to, right? Like it becomes a way to scale your relationship building. And there's really nothing more important than that. So it's a train on wheels and people are able to like jump on at whatever stop they want. And it makes it a lot easier to grow your network, to get smarter and learn from people, to, I call it outsourcing context, right? The idea that, man, I might have a perspective on one thing, but it just takes one person asking it a slightly different way for me to really understand where this value comes for somebody else, right? So the more that you have lines in the water of people sending you inbound questions or ways that they communicate, the more that you rapidly get to iterate around, oh, this is how the world sees me. Oh, this is where they perceive value in this thing that I'm talking about. And the sooner that you stop trying to start conversations with people and instead start joining conversations that are happening inside their head, the more influence that you get, and the better your life becomes.
Yeah. Um, I love this idea of being the guide who brings other people to your people. And we could probably talk for a whole hour on that strategy. I love you said it so simply, which is really beautiful. Melissa's asking to hear you talk about how you sneak in your expertise while you're interviewing people on the show. I love this question because I actually got complimented that my interview style was conversational rather than canned questions I lined up ahead of time.
Yeah.
Tell us what you think.
So first of all, Melissa, good to see you. Melissa is a practitioner of this, right? Like
Yes,
she
she
has a
is.
show that she's doing, and she's repurposing and putting it out there. The key to it, Melissa, that I have found is a couple of things. Number one, as you are planning your shows, right? To your point, Suzanne, you want to have a conversational show. Mm-hmm. And you want to think ahead of time of not what questions I'm going to ask, but what topics we want to land on, right? Yeah. I call it reverse engineering the hook point.
Oh, good.
So as I have that framework in my head, and I have a loose framework how the different things fit with each other. So instead of, going list of questions, which makes it disjuncted, you can, part of the magic is like the repetitions of doing this stuff. You start getting good at transitioning, and you start becoming a good conversationalist, which will serve you in all walks of life, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Then it's a formula that I have in my head is 80% you, 20% me. Right. So as I'm thinking of these hook points, I'm thinking of how can I set this person up to speak on the things that they're going to look really good at speaking about? And how do I reserve 20% of that space for it to land on something where I can also add a bunch of value? And as I keep getting better and better at that, right? So Melissa, I know that you interview rock star coaches, right? Like, and you yourself are a rock star at visual branding for coaches, right? So if you are talking to coaches and how to become a rock star coach, then you're going to talk to them about all the things that they do in their business, right? How they got their knowledge, how they get clients, what the big value is that they bring to people. And within it, you're going to ask, how does how you show up visually affect that? Right. And then they're going to give you their opinion of that. They're going to be like, well, I either don't think about it very much, or I think about X, Y, Z, and this is how I'm showing up. And at that point, that opens up the space for you to then come in and say, yeah, you know what? I've noticed that about you. And you do this really well. And if I was your coach and I was giving you advice, I would advise you to do this and this and this, because this and this and that. And therefore, the next thing that you can go do is this. And all of a sudden, that person's like, oh my God, that's really good advice. What do you think? No, like they, if they are pretty emotionally intelligent, they're going to re-engage you in that conversation because they realize that it's your turn. Yeah. If they're not, you still have put it out there, and anybody watching is going to be like, wow, that was just a really good nugget that either I can use for myself, or I didn't realize that Melissa thought at this level. And you now have your piece of content that you can go share that's about you. And the last thing I want to say is that it's totally normal when you are first doing this stuff to feel like it's all about them. I would say for about 1.5 years, 2 years, that's really all I focused on. I was just like, man, how can I just like highlight other people as much as possible? And I got really comfortable in doing that. And I realized that it wasn't driving as much results as I wanted. So I started kind of reverse engineering. How do I get myself more into the conversation? And what I realized that number one, that's okay, right? Like as long as you start from the giving place, you can always come back around and start asking for you too, right? Like it's that whole like giving without anything in return. And when you ask, people give. But two, I started realizing that if I can listen to what somebody says and then summarize it really well and reflect it back to them, that by itself is a superpower, right? Like the idea of being able to take what somebody said and just like synthesize it, kick it back to them, and let them get another draft at it is something that is going to serve you really, really well. And as you get better at that, you start to see in those summaries and in the things that you're saying where else you can interject a little bit of your own genius as well. So, like,
Yeah.
start with trying to save a little bit of space for your expertise, but as you get better at like summarizing it and kicking it back to the person, you're going to start finding more and more areas where you can add value to the conversation as well.
Yeah, I'm going to pull out that nugget and share that. That's
Cool.
genius. The last thing I want to ask and talk a little bit about is something that I have found myself doing, being a member of your community. And I'm wondering if this is common, if it has a name, if it's a thing. So you bring someone of value to the stage.
Mhm.
I listen, I resonate, I follow that person. Now I'm exposed to their wisdom,
Mhm.
their content, and what they're doing. Sometimes there's been a couple of your people who have become connections of mine. So that idea of I like your content, I find it valuable, I've learned incredible things. I literally implement everything you tell me to do, which
You're
is
doing it right now. I love it.
I'm doing it right now, which is kind of cool. I don't do it all.
Yeah.
Melissa does it all.
Yeah. Sure.
Um, I will say that what is that when I'm learning from you, you're bringing me awesome people. You are literally the stage for people for me to learn from. And because I trust you, again, that trust is transferable. Thanks, Daniel. Um, I trust those people to be experts in what they're talking about. And I end up learning from them because I don't have my radar up or my filter on or my, oh, it's just more noise online. No, it's someone Pablo's talking to. I'm going to listen to that. So, what is that called? How do you increase that? Or how do you encourage that?
Uh, I'm a, when the community thing hit me as a business model, uh, as I think right? Like I was at my brother's funeral, 1,200 people showed up, and immediately I looked around this like church, and I'm like, I don't care what I think about the Catholic faith. This right here is my community, and I can never leave this. And my head went to, okay, this just solved for churn. That's a business case. There's a business model out here, whatever. And the first example I thought was like, man, it's just like if I was to buy a Harley Davidson, 2 years later, I can't go get a Honda motorcycle because I'm going to lose my friends. And to me,
Yeah.
yeah, and to me, that's the power, right? Like the power comes from if you and JD are friends because of me, I'm always going to be a part of your life. Right.
Yeah.
So I just see that as the ultimate, call that the selfish piece, right? I just see that
Mhm.
as the ultimate power. If you were the connection point between two people having a relationship, that's power. And that's why to me, the idea of not trying to be king, but trying to be a kingmaker is the ultimate strategy if
Mm.
you are trying to be influential. Because anybody that's out there trying to be king, if you're trying to be king, you're in competition mode. If you're being a kingmaker, then everybody wants to meet you and they want to be put on by you, and eventually they're going to owe you one. And you don't have to like transactionally have this like tab of people owing you one, but these are all just seeds that you're planting out there. And the day that you need something and you throw up the bat signal, man, that's all going to come back to you in the fruit that you planted out there. So I don't know if that's what you're trying to tee me up to
Yes.
say, but that the whole
Yes.
like kingmaker mentality thing is really profound. That's why my company's
Mhm.
called Be the Stage. Because when I was on that stage in front of the Economic Development Agency of Miami, and I thought, oh, I can do this trick. I didn't think, oh, I need to go get on more stages so people see me and like see me as a celebrity. I thought, how can I provide a stage for others to be guilty by association, so that everybody gets this like this thing going, right? Like
Yeah.
the validation of being on the stage, the guilty by association with great people, and the ability to connect to each other is the part that most people, when they think of social media, they don't understand. They think that the social media game is a game of how can I be the celebrity for everybody, when in reality you can be the connection point for everybody, and that is a much more renewable source of power than is the power over kind of like form of like, no, let me be your leader, when instead it's like, no, let me just evangelize the things that are really
Yeah.
important to you and the people that are important to you.
Yeah. Well, that's the perfect mic drop moment to wrap up, because that is the wisdom that I wanted everybody to take away from this conversation, that that's really what it's about. And thanks for being you. I appreciate you. How can people follow you, get in touch, tune into your weekly show? What's the story there?
I think number one is, if you are following Suzanne and you're watching this stuff, like wherever you're following it, like leave a review, share it, leave a social, like leave some kind of thing to support you, Suzanne. Cause I think that everything that you are doing is correct, right? Like
Thank you.
you
Thank you.
are the way that you've built, yeah, for whatever that means, right? Like as
No,
the
I
judge.
don't care what it means. It means a lot
Yeah.
to me, and it
Yeah.
makes
No, listen, the way that you started your community, to me, I was like, all right, Suzanne totally gets this thing, right? Like you were very deliberate about figuring out how to get to Avengers instead of trying to be the queen of that thing. And bringing in people that you can really put on, is the smartest thing you can do. And I could tell that that was the number one place that you were putting your time. So I just want to put that stamp of approval out there. This
thank you.
idea that I think anybody that supports you gets it back tenfold. And therefore I have no problem being like, dude, go support Suzanne, because it's going to be in your best interest. That's number one. Two, if you want to, yeah, there you go. So we have a content repurposing cheat sheet, right? Like the name of the game of this thing is like taking it from that stage
Yes.
moment to repurposing that stuff and making that one seed into 15 seeds that you put in 15 different pots across 5 different ecosystems. And we
Yes.
have this like cheat sheet of how we do it, where we used to spend a lot of time doing it. Now we've made it really, really efficient with tools like the script and stuff like that. So go download the cheat sheet that you can find at bethestage.live. You can download that thing. And then beyond that, I would love for you to come to my show. Go to the it's a tough link to put, but it's the B2B Community Builder Show. And if you
I'll come back and
yeah, if you look
definitely
for it
share
anywhere
that
on
with.
YouTube, anywhere on any podcast platform, you'll find it. And yeah, I would love to connect. I want to be friends. I want to be your
Yeah,
friend. Person
love
that
it.
was just like me.
And I'm going to share your content cheat sheet in the Idea Lab community, and that will be in the resource section with tons of other resources, book summaries, mini courses, all for free. And you can connect with some amazing entrepreneurs. And I look forward to chatting with any of you about that community and why I do it, how I do it. And thank you again,
Oh,
Pablo. I
and don't
appreciate
forget,
you.
Suzanne's coming on.
Oh, yeah.
Suzanne's coming on the B2B Community
Oh,
Builder Show
yeah.
at some point here in
Oh,
the next
yeah.
like 3 or 4 weeks. We've got an onboarding call happening, so
Yes.
tune into
Yes.
that so you can see the other part 2 of this compelling conversation.
I just want to say thank you for that. And that it's really been on my kind of checklist of, I feel like I've made it now that I've been invited. So
I know this game, Suzanne. I know that you are a giving person, and I
yeah.
can also sense that you are competitive and you got goals and whatnot. And when you start like, yeah, I get it. I get it. And you deserve it. You have absolutely earned the microphone. Long
Oh,
overdue.
it's
I can't wait to
amazing.
have you on
Thank you
there.
so much.
There's a ton I want to learn from you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being here today. I appreciate you. And everyone, make sure you're following Pablo on LinkedIn and reach out and connect with him. The value is insane. the stage that he provides, the other entrepreneurs he brings to the stage, follow them too, because every single one of them has dropped so much value, and don't miss out. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you.
Yeah.